Honeyboo had a diameter of 25 metres. The development and construction of these flying machines created the most top-secret documents and the most top-secret projects of the Second World War. The engine of the Honeyboo was the Kohler tachionata electrogravitation motor in combination with a Bundograf belt generator. This gives weight to the suggestion that international oil companies, who control the majority of world commerce, may have something to gain by the continuing suppression of the technology which keeps these massive machines silently in the air. One explanation for the emission of light commonly associated with the night sightings of UFOs is that one method of propulsion is an intense cathode ray emission, creating a vacuum into which the craft moves. Craft fitted underneath with tank guns developed for the Sherman, Panzer or Panther tanks. Although originally these craft were designed to carry electronic guns, they were later fitted with 7.5 centimetre tank cannons. The weight of the cannon would not have been a problem on the Honeyboo craft, which weighed almost 100 tons anyway, because the tachyon electrogravitation engine generated its own gravitational field. Plans have been discovered for much larger craft. Honeyboo 4 had several guns. There is also evidence of small, highly manoeuvrable craft. There were 17 vril of 11.5 metres with a speed of 2,900 kilometres per hour with remote control gun. UFO information is also available from the Huygens Society. Next, our translator comments on some newspaper clippings.
Here's an interesting press release. The first UFO flies in Prague. Flying saucers invented in Germany. Reconstructed flying saucers. The questions if planet Earth is under the control of the UFOs is an interesting one. Is there a danger from an invasion from space? Above the river Elbe there was seen a mysterious flying saucer. There was a hunt for UFOs in Canada too. The American President Jimmy Carter has seen a UFO too. All over the world there has been sightings of UFOs and mysterious flying objects. Mysterious UFO turns alarm at the NATO. Secret UFOs above Hessen. The interests of UFOs is Soviets' aim too. Edwin Aldrin, the second man on the moon, saw 7 UFOs and he was not allowed to talk about it. UFOs at night above Hamburg. 2 policemen saw it too. 100 Germans saw a blue UFO. The watch stopped. UFO above Soviet Union. Nuremberg. Pilot hunts UFO. US secret documents prove UFOs caused atom weapons to be useless. Space pieces, a newspaper headline, the mystery of UFOs are solved. UFOs do not come from outer space, but are Nazis who want to create a new Reich. Governments of the world are informed but afraid. If there is a serious economic crisis, they are afraid the Nazis will come with their flying saucers.
It is not only flying saucers that have been seen, but also flying cigars. Huge spaceships shaped like a cigar. These could be the motherships. The idea of a mothership was developed in Germany in 1944, or possibly earlier. This project was called Andromeda. They were 109 meters long, powered by 4 Tula engines. They were designed to carry 1 Hanibu and a few vril. George Adamski also saw a Haunebu-type spacecraft. He claimed they came from Venus. The CIA recommend to security advisors what information may go to the press in order to avoid panic. Almost all photographs from then on have been censored. About that time, a movie called Earth vs. Flying Saucers was released, but very soon disappeared. This had extraordinary special effects and has only recently turned up in local video stores. An American farmer who witnessed the landing of a flying saucer claimed that the occupants spoke German. The farmer was arrested. Adamski had a friend who also saw flying saucers landing. He was a relative of Winston Churchill. His name was Desmond Leslie. Adamski and Leslie were not arrested. From then on, saucers looking like a Haunebu 2 were thought to come from Venus. The origin of the many types of UFOs seen in almost every country on the planet remains a question. It is interesting to note the very great interest shown by the German military before and during the war in the Antarctic continent at the South Pole. In 1938, as Germany was strongly preparing for war, Captain Richter led an Antarctic expedition. He was sent there by Hermann Goering. This top-secret expedition was directed to ice-free parts of the Antarctic. The German part of Antarctica was called Neuschwabenland. German flags were erected. At the height of the Second World War, Admiral Dönitz, the submarine warfare expert, made a very secret mission to move the so-called Last Battalion. There is evidence of a number of secret bases in the Antarctic. Admiral Karl Dönitz and a president of the Third Reich signed the surrender documents which ended World War II in May 1945. But they never surrendered the Third Reich itself, so officially Germany never surrendered. And this raises the possibility that there may still be German forces in the Antarctic. At the beginning of the war in 1939, Hitler said that if Germany was overrun, the fight would continue from outside. Perhaps we need not place any special significance to this remark. During 1952 in Washington there was panic. They went straight over the White House. A number of radar surveillance centres had the same alarming images on their screens. This was July 1952. Some years prior to that, in 1946 and 1947, Admiral Byrd undertook a US Navy invasion of Antarctica disguised as a scientific expedition. It had the code name High Jump. After preparations in the previous year, Operation High Jump started on the 30th of February 1947. And yet on the 4th of March, after the disappearance of several aircraft, the expedition was cancelled. Although the details have never been published, Admiral Byrd said that objects were able to fly from one pole to the other, and it was necessary to defend ourselves against flying machines from the Antarctic. A New Zealand airline pilot, Bruce Cathy, observed similar patterns over New Zealand. In 1958, the Americans sent a major expedition to the Antarctic, during which on the 27th of August, the 30th of August and the 9th of September, there is evidence that nuclear missiles were fired at Neufundland, the German territory. This could be linked to the holes in the ozone layer in the Antarctic today. There are parts of a report of a kamikaze operation being a joint German-Japanese expedition in the Hanibu 3 to the planet Mars. A Hanibu 3 with a diameter of 71 metres is claimed to have enough power to travel the 75 million kilometres the distance from Earth to Mars. There is a 1945 report that the SS Department D4 decided to make this journey. This would have been a one-way trip, unless they received help along the way or at the other end of the journey. In this latter part of the war, the level of desperation was sufficient to try anything that could change the fate of Germany. The Hanibu 3 was supposed to reach Mars in 8.5 months, in January 1946. The Hanibu 3 was the only craft which had the speed to reach Mars, and yet if it did arrive, there's no evidence of a friendly welcome. Many researchers, seeing this huge carved face on Mars, wonder if it might have been carved long ago as a deliberately grim reminder left by a civilization destroying itself with war and greed, or nuclear holocaust, perhaps millions of years ago. There's an old Egyptian legend of the god Marduk being sad about his home country, Mars. There are photographs of pyramids on Mars and of a ruined city the size of Los Angeles, complete with an underground grid system still emitting infrared or heat radiation. We can only speculate on these things, but it is remarkable that with satellites able to read a newspaper on Earth from various vantage points orbiting around the planet, and with almost every astronaut coming back with stories of seeing flying saucers in space or being greeted by 100 spacecraft on what is supposed to be the first landing on Moon, that no believable explanation has been offered regarding the vast number of sightings by people of all ages and professions. Whilst it makes little sense for armament manufacturers to create hundreds of thousands of nuclear bombs, enough to extinguish all life on this planet many, many times, there is likely to be more to this puzzle. And it may be one of the many vitally important realities which are kept secret by the powerful few. It is, however, worth mentioning a report in the highly regarded Australian magazine Nexus that a Russian spacecraft photographing Mars ceased transmission in the presence of a huge UFO. Perhaps the Americans and Russians are preparing their Star Wars capabilities for an invader from another planet. Or perhaps we are being used as a manufacturing base for deadly toys to be delivered to some distant intergalactic war game. Every ancient civilization has stories of space travelers in fiery chariots from the sky. Legends of Marduk and other space gods from the past usually include predictions that they will return. We are still left to guess whether the UFOs seen so often are evidence of visitors from outer space or examples of advanced anti-gravity craft made secretly on Earth in great numbers. Whatever the truth of these things is, it may be time to find a new system of planetary management, where love is the currency and money and time are only rated brief mentions in history books.